Good day and welcome to SCO BRICS Insight, where we talk about the latest news, information and analysis of what's really going on in Russia and the BRICS. Now, my name is Rod Mackenzie, and today I want to talk about the most pressing issue facing the European Union today. It's not only its decline, but its serious reluctance to acknowledge that this decline has happened. The European Commission leaders continue to adopt an outwardly confident stance, offering all and sundry unwarranted guidance and envisioning itself as a cornerstone of the global order. However, it's lost the internal gravitas that once sustained that illusion. The concept of the EU power has become a hollow echo, cloaked in the language of so-called values that many of the population of Europe no longer seem to fully align with. The bloc's inability to establish peace is a key issue that's been identified time and time again. It opts for confrontation, first with Russia, then with China, and then finally with reality itself. Now, the EU has now no significant autonomy. It now operates as a vassal and an ongoing extension of US power in Europe. The EU is no longer a key player on the global stage. It's now a supporting cast member, often shown to be unwelcome and increasingly irrelevant. Now, the European Union has been experiencing a rapid decline. Just 15 or 20 years ago, it projected a level of global importance and confidence, and it's evident that the cracks and fissures now are impossible to ignore. Now, there are numerous reasons for this. The situation is marked by the level of politicians at the top, like Ursula von der Leyen, and the Estonian non-entity and rabid Russophobe Kaja Kallas, who are to politics and diplomacy what horse shit is to hot cuisine. This has caused political inertia, and then there is the population that is totally apathetic. However, the primary cause of this collapse is the bloc's unrelenting selfishness and stupidity and its refusal to give, but only to demand from others. Now, before I continue, I would like to make an appeal. If you like and enjoy my videos, you can help me fund the channel and contribute to its further development. You can do this by making a small donation, which you can do by clicking on the thanks button at the bottom of the video screen, or by clicking on the Buy Me a Coffee link below in the credits. Everybody who donates does get a personal thank you from me, and do keep the comments coming. Love to read them, love to respond to them. Now, the decline of the EU was most evident in last week's spectacularly unsuccessful EU-China summit. The Eurocrat leaders went to Beijing with nothing to offer, armed only with a desire to demand that China obey its commands over Russia and adhere to its trade rules. Now, China, as we know, has historically maintained a distinctly balanced relationship with the European Union, and it responded in a manner consistent with this perspective. They simply said there was nothing to discuss, now just fuck off, and by the way, the bus to the airport is parked just outside. And then, of course, as if to emphasise the strategic shift, the bloc then, a few days later, made a series of humiliating concessions to the USA. Brussels has agreed on behalf of the 27 countries of the European Union to purchase a significant quantity of American energy and weapons in response to the threat of the US imposing more tariffs on the EU. Now, the concept of its strategic autonomy has now been rendered obsolete. There are no indications of it being a significant power source anymore. What these indicators show is a bloc on the black foot stumbling blindly into its total dependence on the USA. The concept of a sovereign EU industrial or defence policy is not only unrealistic, it's highly unlikely to occur. Now, in this regard, it's pertinent to consider the contribution that the European Union has made over the last 40 years to the global landscape. Now, one might historically say the introduction of the euro currency, but actually the euro is more of a poor relation to the Deutschmark than a rival to the US dollar. However, beyond this, its legacy of one is of oppression and self-justifying tyranny. Its whole infrastructure was based on the USSR and was built to dominate others. Its political philosophy was designed to defend conquest and exploitation. Now, 15 years ago, I went to a conference where one of the speakers was Federico Mogherini, EU's foreign policy chief at the time. Now, the topic was the European Union's new role in the world. Now, one suggestion they could not accept was the bloc should offer something to the world without expecting some sort of reward. Their worldview doesn't allow for that. I mean, despite global concern regarding climate change, the EU has strategically utilised green regulations as a trade tool, threatening and imposing penalties on developing countries who don't follow their rules. The result? Well, the Western Europe is unique in this respect. It's lost its influence and relevance. Furthermore, it appears that the bloc is not fully aware of its significance of its loss. It's important to consider, though, whether the European Union still has a role to play on the global stage. Now, there is a possibility of that in this case, but that's not due to its strength. Instead, it's characterised by its lack of prudence. Now, the politicians in question are not demonstrating sufficient vision, competence, or restraint, and it's difficult for them to imagine that a peace in Europe. Consequently, they tend to adopt a confrontational stance, particularly in relation to Russia. Now, the issue at hand is not that the European Union is prepared to engage in conflict itself. Its population lives far too comfortably for him to risk that, plus its defence industry is in disarray and disrepair. Now, it is important to note that warfare can be initiated through a combination of strategic and tactical consideration, regardless of the underlying strengths or weaknesses of the parties involved. Meanwhile, the EU elites think stupidly that they can cause a shift in the political landscape in Moscow and bring about regime change, so they persist in supplying arms and weapons to the Ukraine. Now, some individuals are anticipating the extension of this conflict into the Baltic region, and they are very delusional. And there's even been a discussion of the possibility of arming a mercenary army for direct confrontation with Russia inside Ukraine. But it's also evident that the American public want no part of this, and they're not going to allow the sacrifice of their soldiers for the benefit of Europe. Now, it's also clear that the aforementioned points are of great importance. However, the EU's actions have the potential to lead to a global catastrophe, primarily due to their ability to actually think logically and exercise restraint. If a wider war is avoided, what then? What does the future hold for the European Union? Well, it could end up as a museum of irrelevance. It's an individual of subordinate to Washington's. It's already evident there's a specific lack of scientific and technological progress within the group. There's no major champions of technology in the European Union, and it's lost all its global influence. And it's unable to determine its place in the hierarchy, and it lacks the capacity to adapt. I mean, the bloc's just become a permanent satellite to the USA with the implications for both its military and economic interests. Its key industries will be handed over. It's anticipated that the national elites will no longer be in a position to govern, and the collective Western Europe as we know it will cease to exist. Instead, you're going to have the United States of America and its satellites in Europe, with a number of territories just being compliant proxies and can state the photos. I mean, this outcome is consistent with the challenges currently being experienced by the Western European countries, and it's evident that this is the path that they have chosen. So the EU is over, it's irrelevant, and nobody takes it seriously. Certainly not Russia, certainly not China, certainly not the BRICS, and certainly not the USA. Thank you for watching. Please like, share and subscribe, and if you want to help me out, click on Buy me a coffee at the bottom of the screen. Thank you, and I'll see you all again soon. Goodbye.